1. Well, hello all. Today was a bad day. Very bad. I would like to ask my fellow lowly cashiers and stockers for advice, but some questions I would like to be answered by assistant store managers or store managers if possible. I started working in January in a company that itself is pretty good. Pay on average is meh, but for my needs, very good. We have some benefits, and all that was promised in my job interview was respected. I am in the EU, if that's of any importance. Here comes the issue. The last 6 months, I have been working in a small store, meaning you see every colleague all the time. They were all pretty bonded as I came to the store when 2 of the other employees went away. Time goes by, I'm thinking, okay, I'm doing well, but all I do is the register. I wanted to learn other things, to see how the store itself works. How to print goddamn prices, for example. My boss, she's actually a relatively good girl. In this story, promises me to start training me so I can open and lock the store. Problem is when. During my shift, I have to do my regular duties and on top of it all, learn with her all the tiny details on how to receive the products. Order bread on our system and do a bit of training for our bakery. Bakery went fine. What do I do? Well, since I'm not that busy in general, I decided coming to opposite shift, unpaid. Mostly learning how to close and remembering all the administrative stuff for the bakery. Closing is no problem. Times go by, but I am now stuck in a sort of limbo where I'm allowed to go to the safe and take out money, do voids, post voids, etc., but still do not do much else. Boss says in November she will help me more because we are not busy that much. And then today I ask her what is my position here, and she tells me I'm not the person for more important duties. Why? In her opinion, I am all over the place, not concentrating and asking stupid questions. I admit I work in a grocery store and my knowledge of food was not great, but I kept on learning. I showed her I care, I am never late, I arrive earlier than others. The issue with her is me not knowing products. I tried asking how am I going to learn the names of every product when they're kept in the store when I'm 90% of my shift on the register. She says, well, we all learnt it by ourselves. I lost it there. Shouldn't we strive for better? To pass the knowledge? A bit more and I'm done. I noticed the assistant store manager is not very nice to me for the past 5 months. I confronted her and asked her directly, do we have a problem? She said no. Today she admitted under pressure from the boss that she did not like me because of my stupid questions. And this person is an assistant store manager. Someone who's supposed to help newbies? The best part, the boss says that all the other colleagues think the same. All. While being nice in front of me, I was shocked. I know that I cannot be liked by everyone, but the whole store? My God. Example of the stupid things I do. Today we got some packed blueberries. I'm trying to find an expiration date. Nowhere. The assistant store manager said, you do not need to scan that. Why? It will sell. It is food. I need to scan it somewhere. Yes, they sell fast, correct. But I like to ask and understand that if I ask the same thing 5 times, it will get on their nerves. But I go by a philosophy of it's better to ask than realize later that you screwed up. I was in tears, mostly from anger and disappointment. Boss said that for now I need to learn more and then we will see, but she says I am slow. Like I cannot remember things and she has to explain it over and over. That is why I got my notebook, where I'm writing down everything. Not good enough. Question for assistant store managers and store managers. Would you keep a worker like me? Keep me pushing or give up? Next week I will talk to my acquaintance who worked for the same company and see what their advice is. Thank you to all who listened. Hellfreezer's note. The problem here is that your higher-ups are just lazy. It is their job to teach you. It's also their job to afford you the time. Now, I don't know what they will call it in your country, but there is something called a planogram that most stores will have. It's the layout of the shop and what items are meant to go where on the shelves. It's what they use when they're stocking things so that everything goes in a consistent place. They also use it to make changes. Not even being given a chance to work the floor and stock the shelves or even look at the planogram. It's bizarre that they're complaining that you're not learning the things that they already know. Perhaps they've been doing the job so long that they forget there's a learning curve to every job. But you need the opportunity to learn. It doesn't just happen. Also, do not go to a job when you're not being paid to be there. I appreciate that you're enthusiastic, but it's clearly getting you nowhere putting in that extra effort. They obviously don't appreciate it. 2. I work at a store that has an older clientele, and some days it drives me up the dang wall, from people calling during a busy shift to ask me if the description on the website is accurate, to customers getting salty when X, Y, or Z doesn't go their way. Or shocked to learn that they have to wait their turn like everyone else. What I want to remind myself and other retail workers out there is that these sort of interactions we have with difficult customers do not tell the full story, and in many cases, these people may have Alzheimer's or other conditions that affect their ability to act in a socially appropriate way and follow situations. I've had multiple instances where I was taken aback by an abrasive customer, only to realize that they had some degree of dementia. Example, one lady forgot she bought something from me and tried to buy it again. You would be defensive too if reality was constantly shifting and you couldn't keep up. Be easily taken advantage of in trying to advocate for themselves because they don't know the difference between someone trying to scam them and someone honestly upholding a real policy. Older people are targeted for scams, often successfully, so it's smart for them to be on guard when they seem to be on the losing side of an interaction. Example, not being allowed to use a coupon might not seem that different from being tricked into paying higher prices. Likewise, people tend to be more dismissive of you as you get older. A beautiful woman's problems seem automatically interesting to her interlocutors, and she gets a solution easily. But that same woman, 50 years later, may be easily treated as a nuisance or ignored and dismissed. Aggressiveness may seem an appropriate strategy to be heard. Used to seeing things being different. Yeah, they've had time to adjust, but many people just don't learn much later in life, and default to what they learned in their formative years. The future is a foreign country, and not everyone adapts that well. People will go on a shopping trip and they basically want it to feel the way it did when they went with their parents when they were alive, or with their friends when they were young. Instead, they are confronted with a process that confuses and disappoints them. They may have previously relied on a spouse who is no longer around, either to do the shopping they now have or to ease the burden of everything else. If wife always bought Christmas presents and husband is having to do it on his own now that she's gone, it's going to be like a teenager trying to do this task for the first time ever. Many old people have lost much of the support system they're used to. They're tired, dealing with some kind of health condition, and out of spoons. Almost no one is in better condition in their 70s than they were in their 30s, and that takes a toll. The whole shopping experience is likely to be stressful in ways that you don't think about when you were young and healthy. Just getting to the shopping location might be a serious energy expenditure. Prices are terrifying. Lots of systems and norms have changed, and every change is a new thing to deal with, on top of everything else you might have been dealing with in your life. They're probably used to being treated differently. The culture has changed. This can read as entitlement, and may in fact be entitlement, but if you are used to people acting one way to you, very deferential, and they start acting a different way, mildly deferential, that's going to feel like a slap in the face, even if it's fair treatment. None of these things excuse bad behavior. I hope that when you or I are in similar situations that we manage to be graceful and patient and kind. And there are people who absolutely go through the ringer and still manage to be absolutely lovely, while other people are literally just out to be nasty and see if they can get a minimum wage worker fired just for sport. This isn't saying that it's fair when retail workers are treated badly or that people get a free pass just because they are old. It's just my reminder that the trend of older people being difficult customers is not always because boomers have an army of entitled Karens lining up to make your life harder. There are a lot of people out there who are just confused, sick, vulnerable, lonely, longing for life the way it used to be, and may take that out on you. When it happens again and again throughout the day, it's easy to jump to the worst conclusions and interpretations and get annoyed at the slightest hint of the typical problem behaviors. You're not dealing with one endless customer who gets mad at you about your return policy and can't follow instructions on the pin pad, but a lot of different people who have their own personalities and approaches and problems. Remember to leave open the possibility that you're dealing with a multi-dimensional person trying their best with what they know in that moment, and default to curiosity and respect. 3. A while back, this one smaller chain store had a 90% off clearance sale. It was a massively popular event, so the store was packed. And even with every register staffed, the line was over an hour long to check out. Now, it's one of those stores that is designed similar to a TJ Maxx register setup. A long slab with multiple registers, but one line, when it's your turn to get called to whatever register is free and walk it over to them. The employees had a bunch of bright signs and were pointing out to people that they need to get in the big long line where the signs are. If it wasn't obvious enough with the bored-looking people and their carts of stuff. So I am a customer and had been waiting in the line myself. The line was very obvious and the signs honestly seemed foolproof. But Karen still ignored all of that and ignored employees when they tried directing her to the back of the line. She disappeared, so I assumed she left. It was almost my turn, and I noticed she is hanging out near a register far down the slab away from the line and pretending to look at the checkout items. Then, as soon as a register frees up, she bolts to it and slams her stuff down. Cashier politely motions for the customer from the line to come up and tells Karen that she needs to get in line, as she is taking the customer who had been waiting in line. Karen then shoves her pile of stuff closer to the cashier and tries loading more up. The actual customer is just dumbfounded and steps back. Another employee then starts telling her the same thing. Karen then starts getting nastier and huffing at them, starts saying they need to ring her up, and that she was in line and that she was there first, and then she calls the teenage cashier an a-hole. I see her eyes start getting glassy and then I just snap. The other cashier that was stepping in just looks panicked, and then I say to her, "Excuse me, ma'am, the line is right here. You'll have to take your items and get in line to be rung up," as I motion to the obvious line that she was trying hard not to see. She spins her head around and sasses me, "But I was in line. These employees are refusing to help me. She's lying, saying I was not in line. They don't want to do their jobs." Then she looks at the teenage cashier and sasses, "You need to ring me up now." I immediately say back to her, "Actually, I was here in line the past hour or so, and I just saw you walk up and run in front of this other customer to get to the register. You weren't in line at all. Everyone here has to wait in line to check out, so you will need to take your items and wait until your turn like the rest of us. They're simply doing their jobs. You do not need to yell at them." She was dumbfounded for a second, and the cashiers said they were going as fast as they could so they could keep the lines moving as fast as possible for her. At this point, one cashier who was helping defend her coworker stepped away from the register, stopped ringing, to help the other cashier deal with the Karen. They had started taking the actual person in line's items and were trying to start ringing them up. They pushed Karen's pile back towards her. Some other customers actually backed me up and started saying they saw her cut the line too. Karen at this point grabbed the other customer's items and started shoving them aside and pushing her items back towards the cashier. She then said, "Now you're gonna ring up my stuff. I was here first. I want to talk to the manager. This is ridiculous, calling me a liar." The other customer goes, "Don't touch my stuff." I say to Karen, "Ma'am, you're gonna need to get in the back of that line right now and wait, because that is how stores work. We all saw you cut the line. You need to let this other lady check out and not touch her items. And if you can't comply, then you need to leave." She turns to me and smiles like a psycho. "Well, you must know everything, don't you? And you don't even work here. You've got some nerve, you know it all. Must know more than me to tell me what to do." I smirked back. "Apparently I do know more than you, because I can comply with a line like an adult. Now, if you aren't going to be nice and comply with the employees, then you need to leave." She grunts and shoves her stuff back in the cart and starts walking away. "Well, I never wanted to shop here anyways. I want to know the names of all you cashiers for calling me a liar. I'm going to report you and call corporate, refusing me. I'm never coming back here." And someone else from the line goes, "Thank God, please do not come back." And she actually left. The two cashiers were both scanning the other woman's stuff frantically, like it was her problem, and the woman was saying she didn't want the crazy touching her items, and that was the weirdest experience. Before I knew it, it was my turn. I asked if they were okay, and they said, You must have been a manager, and they thanked me. Told them I had had bad customers a few times and never could quite tell them off, but I just snapped. I didn't like the way she spoke to them, and tried shoving and literally was yelling. There was no reason for that. Another cashier came over quick and said I made her day because she couldn't say any of that. I'm generally not rude to people, but I gave Karen her attitude right back. Honestly, she was disrespectful and psycho, and we had all waited long to check out. I wasn't okay with her cutting in like that. 4. I work in retail at a clothing shop. There's this one regular customer we've colloquially dubbed the Doctor. You'll see why. Here are a few stories. The first time he ever came in, I asked if he needed a hand. He went around the shop ignoring me and just started picking stuff off the racks. No worries, I'll put whatever he doesn't buy back. He came up to the counter with a large pile and asked how much everything individually was. I explained some were $20, some were $15, and some were $35. He reacted shocked and said,
No thank you,
and wandered around again, leaving the mountain of clothes on the counter. He picked up a dress and asked how much. I told him $35. He scrunched his face up and asked,
Can you make it cheaper?
I told him they're fixed prices, we can't change them. He then said,
Well, you see, I am a doctor, and when I go to visit my family, I like to bring them gifts. Are you sure you can't change the price?
Yes.
Can you check anyway?
No. I know. He then put the dress back and walked around the corner into the back room that says staff only and started looking around. I told him he wasn't allowed back there. He nodded but didn't move. I said, No, that means you can't be in here. And he stepped just outside the threshold and kept looking around. When he finally left, he had bought one $15 top and complained that he didn't get a bag because he wouldn't pay the 30 cents for it. But the dress was only the beginning. The next incident happened to my manager. My manager was in the shop, and the doctor came in. My manager approached him and asked if he needed a hand. He didn't say anything, just waved her away. She raised her eyebrows and left him alone. After a bit, he held up a top and shouted loudly,
How much?
She walked over to him and explained everything on those 4 racks was $10. They were the sale racks. He nodded and waved her away again. He came over to the counter and dropped a pile of clothes in front of her. She asked if he wanted all of them. He nodded whilst looking around, refusing to make eye contact. She scanned everything through and told him the total was $110. He told her she'd made a mistake. It should have been $80 because it was all $10. She explained that 3 items were $20 because they weren't from the sale racks. He tried telling her that they were on the sale racks. She had watched him pick the 3 items from $20 racks and said, Well, they weren't, and even if they were, they shouldn't have been. He told her it wasn't his fault they were on the wrong rack, and she just sighed. She asked if he still wanted them. He said,
Okay, I'll pay for it.
She asked if he wanted a bag. He said,
For free?
She told him they were 30 cents, but because he had spent over $100, she didn't mind giving him one for free. He then asked if he could keep the hangers. She explained that we didn't have many left and couldn't spare them. He looked over her shoulder and pointed at an overflowing box of different hangers and asked,
What about them?
She sighed again and said, All right. She gave him 8 of them and watched him knock things over with his free bag as he left. The third story happened to my coworker Cece. My manager and I had already warned Cece about the doctor, so she wasn't too surprised when he came in. But she was not prepared for him to bring his wife. They walked in, and Cece went to greet them. The wife walked off as soon as she came up to them and looked around at the clothes. The doctor held his hand up to stop her before she could even say anything and waved her away. She stood there, confused for a few seconds. The doctor noticed she was still standing there and told her he'd call if he needed her. She cocked her head at him, surprised and confused, and went back to what she was doing. At some point, the doctor called out that the racks were $10 the last time he visited. Cece walked up to him and told him they probably were. He said that they were clearly marked wrong because they were now $20. She explained that the $10 sale was now over, and that it was all $20. So no, they were not marked wrong. She turned and left him to his own devices before he could rudely wave her away again. After a while, the wife came up to the counter, the doctor behind her, and started throwing clothes down in front of her, saying, $10, $10, $10. Cece corrected her, saying, $20, $20, $20. The wife was unimpressed, but didn't say anything. The doctor came forward and said that if they had to pay that much, he wanted the clothes smoothed, clearly meaning steamed. Cece laughed, thinking he was joking. Neither of them smiled. She asked if they were serious, and he said he was. So she steamed the clothes. After steaming the clothes, Cece was rounding it all up, and the doctor asked randomly what clinic she went to. She froze, caught off guard. He asked again, asked if she didn't understand. She said she wasn't from the area, and he asked if she was sure because he's a doctor and he was sure he'd seen her in his clinic before. She asked him what clinic it was, and he actually told her. She saved the details for later, asked if they wanted a bag, and told them the price. The doctor told her the bags were free. She corrected him, explaining they were 30 cents. He said she was wrong because the manager gave him a free bag last time. Cece told him she wasn't the manager and couldn't bend the rules for him. The bags are 30 cents. They didn't take the bag. The second they left, she texted me that she'd survived the doctor and the missus. The second time I had to personally deal with the doctor, there was about 15 minutes until closing time. He walked in while I was getting ready to close. I saw him, sighed, and went to greet him. I said hello and asked if he needed any help. He ignored me and looked around. I stepped in front of him and said hello again. He actually looked at me. I asked if he needed help, and he said no before turning his back on me to keep looking. I stepped in front of him again and told him he only had 15 minutes before we close. He ignored me. I went off to finish getting things ready for the close. After a little over 10 minutes, I asked again if he needed any help. He pointed at the sale racks and asked why they were $15. I told him that was the current sale. He said they should be 10. I asked why. He said that was the price last week. False. I explained that actually they had been $20 last week. He told me that I was wrong and clearly hadn't worked in many weeks, because if I had, I would know better. I cocked an eyebrow at him and told him he was obviously mistaken. I then asked again if he needed any help. He picked a few of the same coat off the sale rack and asked if he could return them if they didn't fit. I told him they were final sale and could not be returned. He said okay and told me to steam them. I said I didn't have the time. He said I did. I told him no. I was supposed to have already closed and I didn't have time to wait for the steamer and then steam 5 coats. He said that it doesn't matter because I could just leave as soon as he does. I said that's not true because I have a whole process to go through before I can leave, but I was happy to put the purchase through now. When he went to the counter, I put it through and asked if he wanted a bag. He said they were free. I said no, they were still 30 cents. He said my manager gave them to him for free. I said that was too bad because I'm not the manager. He then asked me when she was working next. I said she'd be on tomorrow morning. He told me to put them aside and he'd come back tomorrow. I said fine. He then told me to show him where I put it so that he could tell her where it is. I said that wasn't necessary because we only put held items in one place. I got a piece of paper and asked for his name. He started with Doctor. I ignored him and waited for him to continue. He spelled it out and I put it away. He left. I wrote a note for my manager explaining that he had dropped by and would be back in the morning, and that she should expect him to be unhappy. I finished up closing and went home. A couple of days after, he came in and asked me to put items aside for him. I had a crossover shift with my manager, and she told me what happened. She, manager, got to work, saw my note, checked out the back, and braced herself. About 3 hours after she opened the shop, he came in and walked right up to the back, as if he was intending to walk in again. My manager ran up to stop him. He told her he was just going to get his items. She told him that's not how it's done, and ushered him back to the counter. She grabbed the coats for him and came back out. She asked him if these were all he wanted. He didn't answer. Instead, he said he wanted her to steam them, that the
rude little lesbian,
yesterday wouldn't do it. She was a bit shook and explained that she already had. He said he didn't believe her and he needed to see it done. She showed him the unsteamed coats on the racks and compared them to the ones she had already steamed for him. He said he didn't believe her, so she steamed them again. While she steamed them, he asked what clinic she went to. She said one in the next town over. He explained that he was a doctor. For no reason, again, and that he thought she should go to his clinic. She ignored him. After re-steaming the coats, he asked if he could return them if they didn't fit. She said no, they're final sale items. She put them through and asked if he wanted a bag. He said yes. She charged him 30 cents and he said,
No, no, no. Remember, they're free.
She told him they weren't free, they were 30 cents. He said they were free last time. She said not this time. He didn't take the bag. This next story doesn't star our favorite douche nozzle, but instead has a guest appearance from his wife, Mrs. Doctor. I was at work, a few days after the doctor had harassed my manager about the held items he demanded were steamed again, when his wife came in all alone. I immediately recognized her and mentally prepared for whatever I was about to endure. She walked right up to the counter and plopped a plastic shopping bag of clothes on the counter. I said hi and asked what I could help her with. She said she wanted to return these clothes. They didn't fit. Luckily, they weren't the final sale coats that had been bought the last time. I asked if she had the receipt. She did. I asked if the tags were still on. They were. And I finally asked if she wanted an exchange or credit. She said credit. Beautiful, nice and simple. I was relieved to not have to put up with ridiculous behavior this time and just do a simple return. I was almost finished processing it when she pulled her bank card out. I told her she didn't need that. There was no difference to pay. She asked how she was going to get the money back. I told her I was going to put the store credit on a gift card for her to use within 3 years. She told me she didn't want a gift card, she wanted her money back. I explained we don't do cash back. She said she didn't want cash, she wanted it on her card. I told her, like I just said, we don't do that. She asked why not. Everywhere else does. I asked if she meant our sister stores were a franchise. She said yes, everywhere. Big W, Safeway, Kmart. I repeated my question about our sister stores, and again she said yes, and named shops that are not us. I said, well, as part of our policy, we can do an exchange or store credit, but we cannot do cash back. She, again, said she didn't want cash, she wanted it on her card. I explained that it's called cash back. She asked if the returns policy is written anywhere. I pointed to the sign in front of her that said, Our Returns Policy. She said she didn't read that. I pulled out her receipt and pointed to the very bottom where it had our items policy. She said she didn't read that either. I told her it's also on our website. She said she's never been on our website. I told her that was fine, but she did ask. She said, so what do I get? I told her again, an exchange or store credit, that's all. Those are her options. She said that wasn't good enough. I told her that was too bad, because these are her options. We stood in silence, her glaring at me, myself smiling at her, for a little while. Eventually, she said she'd take the store credit. I confirmed that was what I was already doing before all the confusion and finished it off for her. She told me she wasn't happy. I said okay. She told me she was never coming back. I said okay. She told me to tell my manager. I said okay. I smiled, waved, and wished her a good day as she left, staring over her shoulder at me. And now we're getting to the end of our doctor stories. He hasn't come in for a while. I wonder why. I was at work, like always, and I was helping a customer. Of course, the doctor walks in and approaches me, interrupting myself and the customer. He tells me he's been waiting for 10 minutes. I watched him walk in literally 48 seconds ago. I told him as much, and that he might want to watch if his memory is this bad. I also said I was helping someone and would be with him when I was done. He raised his eyebrows at me as if to intimidate me, and didn't move. I raised my eyebrows at him and stared back. He wrinkled his face and turned to look around. The lady I was serving said something about, "How rude," to which I agreed. After I'd finished helping her, she glared at the doctor as she left and I approached him. Before I even got to him to ask what I could help with, he held up a hand, refusing to look at me, and waved me away with his fingers. Entitled twat. I reminded him that he was asking for my help before when I was busy, and now that I was available I could help him. He said nothing and turned his back to me. I was not having any of this crap today. I walked around him to face him and did my "oh hello, how can I help you" routine. He sighed, rolled his eyes, and turned away again. I shrugged and went back to work. I had loads of stock to unbox, and while I was behind the counter opening some boxes, about 20 minutes after I left the doctor alone, he walks up to the counter and drops a bunch of clothes on top of the new dresses I was about to hang. He started to say something, so I held up a hand to silence him, while looking down at the counter. I picked up the pile of clothes, I pushed them into his hands, and moved the new stock off the counter, then took the pile back and placed it down. I then took a deep breath, smiled, and asked if he wanted all of these. He was apparently gobsmacked. He blinked at me a few times, then seemed to remember he was an entitled douche nozzle and said he only wanted them if I would steam them. Luckily for me, the steamer wasn't working at this point, so I told him as much. He asked if I could try. I explained that as the steamer was not steaming, because it wasn't working, there was no steam and I couldn't steam them. Because the steamer wasn't working, we had to put it out back. So I went out, plugged it in. The doctor tried to follow me out there, and I reminded him of the last time he came out the back, and it wasn't allowed. He still was not allowed. That hadn't changed. He stepped back and watched from the doorway. The steamer didn't steam. I gestured to it. He told me I had to turn it on. What a concept. I showed him the red on light. He asked if he could try. Didn't know he was that kind of doctor. I said absolutely not. Customers were not permitted to use the steamer. He sighed and waved me out. I turned it off, put it away, and came back out. I asked if he was satisfied. He shook his head and asked how much the clothes were. I told him they were $20. He asked if I could do 10. I laughed. He smiled and asked, "Yes?" I smiled and said no. He shook his head. I asked if he was buying them. He looked around the shop, sighed, put his face in his hand, looked sadly at the clothes, and so on. I asked again, a little louder, if he was getting them. He looked annoyed and said, "Fine." I smiled and processed the purchase. I slid the folded pile of clothes towards him and told him to have a nice day. He looked at the pile and asked for a bag. I said that since he never wanted to pay the 30 cents for one, he clearly didn't need one. He said they were free. I corrected him again, and he said, "So, no free bag?" I told him, "Never a free bag. Not from me." He picked up the clothes and said he preferred my manager. I said, "Okay." He stared at me in silence for a few seconds, and I picked up the new stock to continue my job. Eventually, he left. 5. Good morning. I've had my first strange call to my business. First, a little backstory. My wife and I own a model train store. We've been in business for about 6 years and see a few strange things in our travels. But for the most part, everyone is cool. Here's the story. This past Wednesday, the 27th of November, 2024, I received a call on my personal phone. This is expected as my number is on our business card. What was strange to start it off was it came up private number. Since I own a business, I answer all calls, spam or not, and as we had just gotten back from a show on Monday, it wasn't a stretch that someone would have called with questions or wanted to buy something. When I answered, I got a reply.
Is this a model train store?
Yes, it is.
Do you know anything about MacLeod?
This is a German maker of model trains. I know a little bit. Anyway, the conversation goes back and forth about a transformer that his dad had recently purchased that was from the 50s. The caller described the device as having red wire leads that come out and a dial on one side that changed the voltage from 1 volt to 220 volts. As I was unfamiliar with this power pack, I attempted to direct this person to someone who knew more about it than I did. This is where the call took a strange turn, and I messaged my wife to join me and listen to this call.
I have a strange question, but would 30 volts hurt someone?
No, I work with electricity for my day job, and this will give you a little tingle, but nothing to worry about. Voltage won't hurt as much as amperage can unalive you.
I know, but I need to know if I should tell someone.
Thinking that someone got shocked and a little hurt.
I'm glad you can't see me right now.
That's a strange comment, I think.
I'm not sure if you can help me. I don't think you understand. Do you remember those leads I told you about with the clips on them? Well, I went to the store and I got 2 of those 3-inch rings like you would put your keys on them, and attached them to the clips.
Oh, so you got shocked?
No, well, sort of. I put them somewhere I shouldn't have and turned the controller on.
My wife and I realized he stuck his dick in the rings, and shocked himself. Sir, I don't think I will be able to assist you from here.
Oh, okay. Sorry to have wasted your time. Goodbye.
My wife and I turn to each other and go WTF. Instantly we think someone set me up for a prank, so I called everyone or messaged anyone I knew to say if they set me up. Cause if it was funny AF, but everyone replied they had not. I'm honestly afraid that this was a real call. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Adventures in Fast Food and Retail, episode 218. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And do support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. Okay, no more business today, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: what minor thing frustrates you the most at the moment? I'm speaking because I need to paint my office because it's terrible and awful and patchy, and I just cannot find... I know the kind of green I need because I'm going to double it as a green screen, but I cannot find a shade of green that I like within a reasonable budget, because this is not a big room. Ideally, I just need one wall done, but I will paint the whole thing. It's not a big room, so I'm looking and looking and looking. I'll see one I think that might do. Then I realize, no, that's too dark. That's the one. Oh, that one looks perfect. And I'll see, and it's just a teeny tiny tub, but it's like $50 for a tiny tub. So to paint in this room, it'd be about 100. Then you can get the actual proper chroma key paint, like green screen paint, which, again, that's in the small tub, but because it says green screen paint on the can, they're charging more for it. Disney used to do one called Gamma Sector Green, but you can't really get that anymore. I think my only option might be to trundle down to B&Q and get them to mix it up for me. Which I don't want to do because it's the next town over and... Anyway, I'll figure it out eventually. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And today's answer comes from Fast Food and Retail 176. And this one was about, do you like or do you tolerate cream cheese in your sushi? Okay, let's see what we have. Today's answer comes from Strangestrigo. Love cream cheese in sushi, but I've been eating and making Cali rolls that way since I was a kid. My mom was taught how to make it by her English students in Japan, so I didn't give it a second thought until over a decade later when someone mentioned it was an American thing, like adding ice to tea. Not all sushi is improved by it, but this feels like the pineapple on pizza thing. It's just a possible ingredient. Quite well, here, well put. I mean, if you enjoy it, then shove it in your face and enjoy it. I don't know why anyone else would concern themselves about it. Thank you very much for your answer. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.